Welcome to our training, Keeping Up with the Evolving Cyber Landscape. By way of introductions, hello, I'm Emily. I'm our Senior Manager for Events here at GovLoop. And today I have the added pleasure of also being your moderator. So thanks so much for joining me. And a special thank you to our partners at Security Information Systems, Splunk, Fortnite Federal, Cumulus, and CyberArk for helping us put on this session today. So let's get right into it because the current state of government cybersecurity is vastly different now than it was mere months ago. And then it was different from mere months before that. So agencies have always understood the importance of a secure network. But now cyber professionals must also account for changing policies and mandates. The good news is that new technologies, processes, and workforce improvements are helping government agencies keep up. And today, our speakers will share how they're addressing and looking at this current cyber landscape. But before we get into all that good stuff, well, I have some housekeeping items to go over with you all. First things first, we have some great resources available for you on the console under that resources button. This is where you can also find some intel on all of our speakers, so make sure you check that out. If you need access to the closed captioning feature, just look for that show captions icon at the bottom right-hand corner of your panel. You'll also find if you're having any technical difficulties, you can shoot us a message to that Q&A tab and one of my GovLoop colleagues will get your questions answered. And it's in that same tab where you can ask our experts questions, so don't you dare be shy. Put your questions in early and often. You can also chat with your fellow Govies using that chat button. And we are, of course, recording this training. So check your inboxes tomorrow because we'll email you a link so you can watch the entire session on demand. All right, with all of that housekeeping out of the way, let me introduce you to our bevy of speakers today. We got a lot. First out of the gate is Sean Flowers. He's the Executive Director for Ready for Cyber. Then we have Paul Gomez, Commercial Director for Security Information Systems, Bill Lemons, Director of Federal Systems Engineering at Fortnite Federal, Tu Lu, who's the Chief Product Officer at Cumulus, Paul Kurtz, who's the Chief Cybersecurity Advisor at Splunk, and last but certainly not least, we have Gazar Sultan, who is the Vice President for CyberArk Identity Solutions. Thank you all so much for being here. And as the list of speakers, well, it implies we've got a lot of content to go over. So to better understand each of our speakers' security journeys, I sat down for one-on-one fireside chats with them. Here are those stories. Here to talk about all things cybersecurity is Sean Flowers. He is the executive director for Ready for Cyber. Sean, thanks so much for being with us.
Yeah, glad to be here.
All right, so cybersecurity, this is a pretty broad topic. So I want to bring the funnel down a little bit here. What are some strategies or tools that are really helping an agency defend against cyber attacks that are only getting more sophisticated?
Yeah, so, you know, what I've seen is, of course, we're going to talk about AI here. So we'll just kind of bring it right up. So the trend is kind of trending to AI, just like it was trending to cloud, maybe 10 years ago. And some of the strategies that we're trying to do now is how do we actually keep up with some of the threats that are out there? How do we ensure that we're defending our technology can keep up with what's changing, can also react to the use of AI by our adversaries, and how can we use AI to get better detection and techniques from our current security that we have now. And some of the strategies that I've seen organizations want to use is, of course, using AI to kind of streamline things. How do we use it to predict trends? How do we use it to predict certain outcomes? How do we use it to enhance our ability to detect anomalies? So that is kind of cashing in on security values and AI enhancements that's kind of slapped on to most of the security tools out there. But I think the real strategy that would really help It's just really getting a handle on risk reporting. So really trying to really understanding what that baseline looks like, and then being able to use the tools to kind of enhance and track if risk are being increased or decreased using some of those AI tools out there, or is it not being as useful as it may be because the landscape is rapidly changing. And then maybe we have to kind of look at where what other means and methods we can use to mitigate risk in some of those areas.
So let's talk about some of the challenges that exist in kind of meeting, some of those objectives that you were talking about there. Where do you see some of the biggest pain points or hurdles in addressing cyber vulnerabilities within the organizations?
Yeah, so a lot of our clients, they want to talk about AI. And I think the issue that we have now is technology is just rapidly changing, even faster than we've all like to think it is. And with that, new technology introduces new vulnerabilities. And it's really hard to kind of keep up with the holes and the unprotected, the unwittingly unprotected systems or processes that come with it. And like I said, with the use of AI, everybody wants us to talk about it. Everybody wants us to educate about it and integrate it. That is what we do. And we just run across a lot of, well, how do we govern? How do we put protections in place? How do we stop over permissioning? How do we ensure that the information that AI isn't able to have too much permissions? How do we ensure that people are using it correctly? So those are some of the challenges that we have with the emerging technology. It's really hard to govern because we don't really understand it yet, and there's also inherent vulnerabilities that we do know about. The known that come from using AI that we've seen studies on, and then there are some of the known unknowns about when you implement it in your environment, how it's going to react and integrate, and then the unknown unknowns. We just don't really know how security is going to be impacted once we use these. What type of risk updates will bring? What type of 0 days exists out there that eventually create really big issues for us later on? So it's just kind of keeping up is just the biggest issue that I've seen with new tech.
When you're talking about known knowns, unknown unknowns, unknown unknowns, it's complicated just listening to it, let alone understanding kind of the scope of the vulnerabilities. It's very it's such a big picture, and it's so hard to kind of encapsulate what you're talking about. So I really appreciate. So
Hmm.
with what you just said, the challenges that exist, the opportunities that are out there to perhaps better protect networks or policies, all those different things. What are some ways or some best practices about how to navigate in this current and then obviously future state environment? Anything that you found that is really useful?
Well, yeah, you know, and in my experience and the things that I've seen, you know, you have to look at it more than just security, just the security office, right? So we have to look at it from how your business does business, right? And that is kind of looking at it from a people process technology, kind of looking at it from a business operations protection. That is just kind of understanding where how do your company make money? How does your business make money? Where does the security need to be from the endpoint? If you're a company that interfaces with customers and process payments, how do you actually how do you ensure that customers have proper account security? How do you ensure you have proper fraud detection security? How do we ensure you have proper permissions on the data that's being captured, and you have proper training for your employees and things like that. So I think it's more of a holistic approach, and how do we kind of reel that in and put security in place for those type of things. And some practices that I've seen and I promote to some of the clients that we work with is just using, kind of look at your people, process, and technology. What are some of the security that your people need to have uh, when it comes to making sure that they're trained, making sure that they understand the technology, because those people are usually the first line of defense and the weakest. And then looking at your processes, do we have adequate processes to respond to security incidents? What do we do with them? Do we process them correctly? how do we actually use the tools and the people to actually reduce the threats and vulnerabilities out there that we have in our environment. And then, of course, the technology is the other part. Do we have the capabilities from the tools that we purchase to actually provide effective and efficient response to that in our environment? We should be thinking about, the next step, the next, what do you need next, not what do you need now. So we should be thinking about how we can combat against, AI fueled attacks from the technologies that we need next and the employees that we need to hire to understand the technology that we need next and the processes we need next versus what we're doing now. If we're thinking about security that we have now and we need people that for the technology we have now, then you're probably already behind.
You and your last answer here kind of addressed what I think I'm leaning towards in this next question. But where can agencies go wrong when they're looking to address cyber vulnerabilities? Because it, you're not going to bat 1,000, right? It's not going to be
hmm
perfect, but in kind of the ecosystem that exists, where can folks kind of go off the rails or maybe not be as secure as they can be?
So I think that when you kind of look at some some gaps that you might have, it's always think that people should be looking at what's going to happen next, kind of looking at trends, seeing what CVEs are out there, seeing what's being reported on the latest cybersecurity vulnerabilities out there, and kind of looking at what are the bad guys doing. How are they taking advantage of the tools? As I mentioned, we have AI. It's great for us. It's great for efficiency, and it speeds up processes, but it also speeds up the bad guys' processes too, and it's efficient for them as well. So, kind of get an idea of how does my business operate, and what are some of those threats that might be amplified from this type of technology. And I think if we focus too much on the now and get caught up in and how am I going to protect myself, you know, now against the threats that I have today, you kind of miss out on what tools you need tomorrow to kind of work on how the threats are going to be enhanced. Tomorrow, what tools you should be using or looking at to enhance what you have and maturing your program to kind of counteract that. Uh, and I know it's kind of a double-edged sword when you kind of think about, well, how can I secure the present while preparing for future cybersecurity demands? Well, it's always, as I like to say, just having that good threat intel feed to kind of know what does your posture look like and where is trends going and where do you see adversaries kind of moving and using the technology that you enjoy for them to kind of advance their mission and be able to disrupt our business processes and our companies.
So, if you are a government organization and you're thinking to yourself, there are a lot of evolutions happening right now in the cybersecurity realm, there's always new
hmm
threats on the horizon. That is not new, and it will continue to be not new. And I got to get my team all rolling in the same direction outside of the security apparatus, my program managers, project managers, my workforce as a whole. A lot of us have probably taken that standard cybersecurity training that can feel a little check the box. Perhaps I've taken it and then still clicked on a phishing email. I'm not outing myself. I'm just saying it might have happened. But I'm curious, how do you create a culture where not just the security team, but everybody's really thinking about cybersecurity as part of their role?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So as as you kind of mentioned, being executive director of Ready for Cyber, we do cybersecurity education and we do custom education where we address those type of issues. Just that. Now, we know that everybody is mandated to have a cybersecurity awareness program, right? But like you said, which we find it's a lot of check the box. It's like, I'm just going through this just to satisfy the requirement. But what we really do is we really make it custom and tailored towards the culture and the identity of the organization, tying it into your actual mission and actually what your company's goals are, what their business is, and actually use relevant processes and tools that you use at your organization. And I really think that's what people really need at companies. And that's why our service is really requested, because people really want programs that actually provide impact and that actually are tailored to what they're doing, because everybody has a unique need. And what we've seen is that if you have programs that resonate with what the mission is and what you're actually doing, people tend to pay attention, because now you can say, well, it's not generic. Actually, I know this tool, and actually I use this, and oh, I didn't know it supported this business effort. I didn't know that it was tied to how we do business in this kind of method. I didn't know that doing clicking on this will expose this type of specific information that's tied to this specific process that we all work on and we all do. So having it tailored to the business and the culture and the identity of the organization will ensure that people are more attentive to what they're actually doing, and they'll take a little bit more pride in protecting the information, because now we know it's just not some random scenario, not a click box, and that's something that you be like, it doesn't really apply to what I'm doing. But when we make it apply to what you're doing, people pay more attention and people are more likely to actually safeguard, because that's something that you actually see in the process that you do every day.
Gotcha. All right, final question for you because we've
Mhm.
spanned a lot in a short amount of time here. So, if you could have one takeaway or one thought you want to leave our audience with today, what would you like them to keep in mind as it pertains to cybersecurity in 2025?
I want everybody to know to, you know, embrace the technology, embrace AI. Don't be afraid to use it. Don't try to suppress it. There are too many tools out there and too many free capabilities out there for everybody to use it, and they will circumvent you if you try to put too many limits on it. But at the same time, be smart about it. Promote cybersecurity education. S- um, Cybersecurity attacks and spam and phishing, they're getting more sophisticated. You need to make sure that you have adequate education and a training program to ensure that users understand and stay up to date on the latest trends and threats. Now threat actors are posing as help desk for Google and Netflix and Facebook. These are just common things that we do every day. People have common issues and they're posing as them to steal sensitive information. These type of things need to be kind of communicated to the people. And I know it can be exhausting by doing constant communication, but people are your weakest link in your organization. So they should be, I believe that the cybersecurity education should be the thing that is spent the most time on and constantly communicated and transparent with all the users, so we can get all those people, from sales to project managers to senior leaders to just even the intern, that are all susceptible to these cybersecurity breaches. So stay abreast of emerging threats. Look at your organization as a whole, and of course, educate, train, and make aware of the people that are in your organization. Security is everybody's responsibility.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sean. I really appreciate it.
Mhm.
Cyber vulnerabilities are constantly evolving, and as technology that prevents them improves, so does the technology enabling those vulnerabilities. So, well, what can you do? My colleague Candace Thorson sat down with SIS's Paul Gomez to understand the role security monitoring plays in addressing vulnerabilities. Here is his commentary.
A modernized approach to security monitoring really is based on integration and intelligence. In today's environment, organizations are really facing and managing multiple systems that are traditionally siloed. Think, physical access control systems, video surveillance, intrusion, fire detection, cyber threat monitoring, all these different systems. And a truly modernized approach really unifies these systems through a single platform, providing real-time situational awareness across an entire security ecosystem. So it's about moving from a reactive to a proactive posture by just leveraging the data that you already have, right, through automation, through interoperability of these systems. And what we constantly hear from different professionals is they're just drowning in alerts, right? So they're starving for intelligent information. So a modernized approach really solves this by just connecting the dots from these different systems and enabling these security teams to identify threats and respond effectively.
So when we talk about modernization, obviously agencies want to modernize because that's going to bring benefits. That's going to be a good thing. When what you're talking about a modernized approach to security monitoring, specifically, how does that help agencies? Like what benefits does modernized monitoring offer?
Sure. Yeah, they're substantial. They really just improve operational efficiencies. So think when these security systems are managing multiple systems through a unified interface, they really spend a lot of time, or spend less time, I should say, switching between these platforms and really more time on actual security. So it enhances their decision-making processes. It improves their compliance management through reporting and having all that in one common operating picture. And then I would just say perhaps, the most significant benefit is resource optimization. So in these environments where budgets are really scrutinized, modernized security really allows these agencies to do more with less. So think existing infrastructure and personnel, maximizing the return on their investments, and really minimizing their risk exposure.
Why do agencies struggle to integrate their physical and their digital security structures?
That's a good question. A lot of things that we hear about that, or I would say like the most common issue we hear is really just legacy infrastructure. So think, over the decades, these different agencies have invested in these different security systems, but it's resulted kind of in a patchwork of technology with different standards and protocols. So they all speak a different language. So that's one. Another would be vendor lock-in. So over the years, there's been a lot of proprietary systems that have been invested in, and they all speak their own language and really limit the interfaces and integrations between different products. So it forces these agencies to really make difficult choices, right? Do they want to continue using these proprietary systems and be locked in, or really invest in a replacement? So that's a big one. And then last, I would just say resource constraints. So with these big projects for integration that really require specialized expertise that may not be within these agencies. So you really have to lean in on other vendors and partners, and you just can't do it by yourself. So you've got to look for different resources. So that's always a challenge within the organization.
We're going to give you a little bit of a crystal ball. So, so how do you see security monitoring, especially in government, evolving in the next, say, few years?
That's a good question. We're seeing a huge evolution towards more situational awareness, more intelligence, autonomy. We're clearly seeing a shift towards more sophisticated AI and machine learning applications. I think that's a big buzzword, of course, and what they're able to do is just identify lots of patterns through big data sets, really. Another significant evolution, I would say, is just the convergence of physical and IT systems. So think, physical security being OT and then cybersecurity being IT. There's a real big convergence of those different departments coming together, and it's really about how you use all those resources together in one room versus they're being siloed within those departments. So looking ahead, we really anticipate predictive security becoming really prevalent, rather than just kind of that reactive posture. And those advancements are really going to require platforms to adapt and evolve along with the customer needs.
Thanks so much, Paul and Candace. You really gave us such a good picture of where and how security monitoring can play a role in that evolving cyber security landscape. So, thank you both so much. In government right now, there is a massive shift happening in the convergence of networking and cybersecurity as a framework for modernization. My colleague John Monroe sat down with Fortinet Federal's Bill Lemons to understand it all. John got the conversation started by asking Bill how he sees the state of network and cybersecurity infrastructure in government agencies. Here's what Bill had to say.
So I think the process of modernization has been kind of an initiative for the past few years for the federal government. Um, that journey has largely been in association with trying to reach some of the mandates associated with zero trust, and addressing this very hybrid workforce, if you will. Um, and there are a bunch of unique challenges and interesting aspects associated with trying to meet those types of demands over that period of time. But just recently, we've seen some pretty major shifts with regards to new administration coming in and looking a little bit more at efficiencies, potentially a return to work initiative in association with that. So that landscape has changed pretty drastically in a relatively short period of time. So I think a number of agencies, in addition to just looking at themselves for, kind of efficiency perspectives, it also comes down to those resources that they leverage as well, and that change of mindset with regards to a very heavy remote workforce now to a bit more back in the office. Some of those systems and facilities that were leveraged heavily before that kind of remote work activity really kicked off in earnest during the pandemic and kind of followed through. I believe that's created a situation where those facilities require a little bit of attention to make sure that they're ready to meet the needs, and that agencies are mindful of how they go after upgrading those environments to kind of not only address the new agency requirements, but also to meet the modernization and efficiency goals that they're trying to as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit because, often agencies have this sort of embedded infrastructure that includes some, outdated network technology. What are some of the pain points that agencies can experience when they're dealing with that?
I think there's a couple of different areas that are of concern, right? One is definitely from a security perspective, and also alignment to some of the newer technologies that are coming along down the pike. So definitely zero trust, huge influencer as well. So making sure that any infrastructure that's in play has alignment and capability of supporting that particular environment. Want to make sure that none of the equipment is aged out, and that software updates and dealing with any vulnerabilities that may exist, that's not a challenge moving forward. And then that efficiency perspective, right? I think there's an additional lens being put on the initiatives moving forward, and you have to take into consideration that additional lens and the requirements therein.
So you mentioned the return to work. So obviously a lot of agencies, they are telling their employees they need to come back. What are some of the challenges they might encounter with as that begins to happen?
Well, I think the volume and age of that equipment, right? Making sure that it meets the needs of the number of individuals that will be coming back to staff, and making sure that those infrastructures are currently up to date and are providing an efficient means in which to deliver the services necessary for the agencies to deliver on their missions.
Thanks so much, Bill and John. I really appreciate how all of these conversations are driving back to the mission of the organization. So thank you so much, Bill, for making that connection for us. Here to talk about all things cybersecurity is Tulu, who's the Chief Product Officer at Cumulos. And we have Paul Kurtz, who's the Chief Cybersecurity Advisor for Splunk. Thank you both so much for being with us today.
It's great.
So let's get started here because cybersecurity is an enormous topic, especially when we're talking about government agencies and how all of these pieces fit together. So I want to lay the groundwork a little bit. And two, I'm going to start with you. What is ICS 527 and how does it impact government agencies?
Okay, yeah, great question. Start with a little bit of history. So back in 2010, if folks remember, we had the Chelsea Manning WikiLeaks incident, right? And shortly thereafter, maybe 6 months to 9 months after that, there was an executive order that came out from the Obama administration, basically directing all of the different departments and agencies to improve the insider threat detection capabilities. And one of the outputs of that was this standard ICS stands for Intelligence Community Standard. 500-27 is just the number assigned to it, right? So it is essentially a very prescriptive auditing policy and guidelines for agencies to collect specific information about user host activity on their network. So it provides a great foundation for agencies looking to start an insider threat program, by starting by what information should you be collecting on your networks about your users. So that in essence is ICS 500-27. So again, just a great foundation for building your insider threat capabilities on top of.
I always appreciate some background information because sometimes you're like, where is this coming from? Paul, talk to me a little bit about what Tu was saying there with ICS 500-27 and its impact on government agencies. How are they kind of realizing these updates?
Well, I think where I would, just to expand a little bit on what Tu has talked about, is to, look at the nuts and bolts of it, of 527, not to get into too much detail. But it's, what do we care about here? What are we looking at? And we're looking at authentication events, logging on to a system, or the creation or the access to delete and to modify data, or user and group management events, security and audit policy changes, system reboots or restarts or shutting down. All of that, those are the kind of things that ultimately we want to be able to track and understand and synthesize and bring together, so we can understand whether or not there actually is a problem with the system, an insider threat with the system.
So, Paul, kind of keeping in that vein here, insider threats have long been a problem, whether they are malicious or not. Insider threats have pretty much existed since the beginning here. So, how has this problem changed or become more acute in recent years?
I would, from my take, is that insider threats have been a lot problem for a long time, but are getting more problematic as we go. And I think a lot of that is because of the rapid changes in technology that are underway, that the ability to, if you will, manipulate data, manipulate information, manipulate systems, is creating more opportunity for insiders. So one of the upshots of this is to make sure that we have a synoptic picture of what's going on our networks, which requires weaving together a great amount of data to look and identify those anomalous activities.
Thank you both so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
In an era of zero trust, your identity within an organization is vital. My colleague John Monroe sat down with CyberArk's Gazar Sultan to talk about what identity is and the role it plays in complex organizations like government agencies. Here's what Gazar had to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So here at CyberArk, we talk a lot about identity security. It is our kind of the main industry that we operate in. And it is an evolution of an industry that's been around for well over 20 years. The term identity security is new, but for the most part, the identity industry and kind of the solutions and the products that live inside of identity security today, again, have been around for many, many years. You may have heard of them in different names, such as identity and access management. There's identity governance and administration, there's privilege access management, and then there's a variety of other kind of components that make up identity security. So again, that's what I would think about. Again, you would be already familiar with those, having deployed them from all different types of solutions that have existed in the past. What we're seeing now is that we're in the what I would call the third or fourth generation of these identity solutions. And when we talk to agencies, when we talk to even enterprise companies, they tell us that they're like one or two generations back, and they're looking to kind of skip and get onto something more modern, especially because the demands of their organizations are increasing and they need the agility. And what users are expecting in terms of an experience is also, rapidly moving forward. So it's important that agencies are also thinking about that digital transformation, and they're also in a hybrid era too, because they're adopting SaaS and they've got kind of previously self-hosted solutions all being utilized together. And it's really important that we can kind of bring something that gives them like a solution for the next 10 years.
All right, well, let's talk about some of the drivers for that. What are some of the big challenges or the big pain points that agencies face around identity right now?
Yeah, you know what? The first thing that comes up is moving to the cloud. There is a lot of being asked of agencies and expectations of agencies to move to the cloud, but not everything is so easily moved. That comes up a lot in our conversations. A lot of the technologies that you would buy, that even we sell to enterprise organizations, they are reliant or they're heavily dependent on technology integrations with third-party applications and solutions. So therefore, everything needs to either work together or we need to figure out a way to make something standalone that agencies can use as well. That ends up being kind of a bit of a challenge that we have to work through along the way. Security is the main part of kind of identity security, as you can imagine. Having said that, the more you talk about security, the less you're talking about all the other aspects like productivity or scale or logistics or deployments and things and so on. We probably will talk about this here in a few more minutes, but security ends up being something that's like the main focus, but detracts from some of the other areas that really deserve a lot more attention as well. There's budget, obviously, especially in the climate that find ourselves in today, and then there's culture around kind of these solutions. What we want to bring in, what makes sense, what's broken, what needs to be renewed. These are just some of the common challenges that we come across, and agencies bring it up to us the most. But we find it even in kind of when we talk to consumer and customer environments as well.
All right, well, let's talk about kind of the actual employee experience, because, we all know that's so critical, to cyber. So to what extent do you see employees kind of recognizing the importance of security, versus, say, seeing it as an obstacle? And how does that factor into all this?
In my eyes, the employee, the end customer of every agency is recognizing that all of this is much, much better for them. People can, in 2025, they can sense when something doesn't feel secure to them or something was overly easy for them to access. Because you wouldn't want that same feeling when you log into your bank account or your 401k or your brokerage account. Like, you want to feel like it was a little bit challenging to get into it, because it then feels like others cannot if they didn't have the credentials that you have. So I tend to find that employees are totally like open to whatever changes they are going to be pushed upon them, as long as they are not antiquated solutions. If there's something modern, right? If I have to download an app on my phone, if the app doesn't feel like it was made in the 1990s, if I have to do some sort of MFA factor, I'm not just going back to the basics of doing like a difficult like SMS MFA factor, a push notification, a fingerprint, a face ID, much more preferred, a lot faster, very seamless. We're all very used to those types of methods. There's no reason why you can't bring them into the enterprise or into an agency. And even today, now, most organizations are pushing towards more of a passwordless like options as well, which then eliminates a lot of the kind of the back and forth between the employee and the service we're trying to get to.
Thanks so much, Gazar and John. It is more evident than ever that identity is such a core component to our agency cybersecurity future. So thank you both so much for drilling that into our heads today. Unfortunately, we are out of time. I want to thank our wonderful speakers for sharing their insights today. Just a quick reminder that we will have some resources available for you to download, so make sure you check those out before you sign off. And we will be sending you a link to the on-demand version of this training, so look for that in your inboxes tomorrow. But on behalf of GovLoop, Security Information Systems, Splunk, Fortinet Federal, Cumulus, and CyberArk, I hope you enjoyed today's session. And as always, we really appreciate and value the work that you do. So thanks for taking the time out of your busy schedules to join us this afternoon. Have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you at our next training. Bye.